My name is Gerald. Today, I'm going to share a story I've never told anyone before. It's about how I became an orphan, but be warned, this isn't a tale for the faint of heart. It's a story of dark secrets, the kind that lurk just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. And once you hear it, you might wish you hadn't. Growing up, my parents were oddly strict about one thing: making sure I took my vitamins. It was more than just a rule, it was a ritual. By the time I was 4, they had already drilled it into me. Every morning, without fail, they'd watch me swallow those little pills, their eyes wide and anxious, as if the fate of our entire family depended on it. One night, when I was about 9 and my little brother, Boog, was 3, my parents decided to go out on a date. It was the first time they'd done something like that for as long as I could remember. They seemed almost excited, like they were trying to capture something they'd lost years ago. My parents were so excited for their night out that they completely forgot to mention my nighttime vitamins to the babysitter. It was her first time watching us, and I could tell she was nervous, trying to keep everything in order. I knew I should have reminded her, but I didn't. I hated those nighttime vitamins. They tasted awful, like metal and something sour I couldn't quite place. For once I thought I'd finally get a break from that disgusting taste. I had no idea how much I would regret it. A few hours went by, and everything seemed pretty typical for a 9-year-old and a 3-year-old. Boog was in bed by 7:30, tucked in tight with his favorite blanket. Katie, the babysitter, let me stay up a little longer. We played video games together, laughing and joking like it was just another normal night. Suddenly, we both froze. A strange noise echoed down from upstairs, a muffled thump, followed by a dragging sound, like something heavy being moved across the floor. Katie and I exchanged a glance, our laughter evaporating in an instant. Neither of us said a word, but we both knew we had to check it out. My brother was up there alone. We headed up the stairs together, our footsteps slow and hesitant, the air between us thick with fear. With each step, the noise grew louder, like something was waiting for us in the dark. Katie sprinted toward my brother's room, her face pale as if she already knew something terrible was waiting behind that door. The moment she stepped inside, she let out a scream, an ear-piercing, gut-wrenching wail that made my blood run cold. I panicked and rushed in after her, barely able to breathe. What I saw still haunts me to this day. Boog was on the floor, motionless, his tiny body drenched in blood. The crimson pooled around him, soaking into the pale carpet. It was like the world had stopped, leaving only silence and the sight of my baby brother lying there, broken and still. As I stood there frozen, trying to make sense of the nightmare before me, a shadow shifted in the corner of the room. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a man, disheveled and wild-eyed, clutching a kitchen knife that glinted under the dim light. Before I could react, he lunged at us with a speed I didn't think was possible. Katie tried to fight him off, her fists swinging wildly, but it was no use. He stabbed her again and again, the blade plunging into her side until her body went limp. She crumpled to the floor, her eyes wide open but empty, like the life had been drained from her in an instant. Just as I thought I couldn't bear another second, I heard it, the rumble of my dad's car pulling into the driveway. It was an old, loud model with a deep, throaty roar that I could recognize from a mile away. For a brief moment, a wave of relief washed over me, so strong I almost sobbed. Those rumbling tailpipes, usually just a noise in the background, suddenly sounded like the sweetest music I'd ever heard. My dad was home. He'd make everything okay, or at least that's what I thought. I heard the front door creak open, followed by the familiar voices of my parents calling out for Katie. Their footsteps echoed up the stairs, slow at first, then quickening as they realized something was wrong. When they reached the top, they saw her lying there. Katie's body crumpled on the floor, blood pooling around her. The sound that came from my mother was unlike anything I'd ever heard, a raw, broken wail that filled the hallway. Then they turned, and that's when they saw him. The man, the psychopath, was standing there, cradling my brother's limp body in his arms like some kind of twisted trophy. I expected my parents to scream, to fight, to do something, but they just stood there, frozen, as if they couldn't comprehend the horror in front of them. And then, in a blur of movement, the knife flashed again. I don't know if it was shock, fear, or something worse, but my parents didn't move an inch while he butchered them. I watched as their bodies crumpled, one after the other, their blood joining the rest, staining the floor in a gruesome, silent symphony. I assumed I'd be next. My legs felt like lead, and I knew I couldn't run, so I did the only thing I could think of. I laid down, squeezed my eyes shut, and waited for him to finish the job. I was sure it would all end in that room, but instead of pain, there was only silence. Eventually, the fear was too much, and I passed out. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, the bright lights burning my eyes. Nurses and doctors moved around me, but no one spoke a word about that night. They treated me like I was made of glass, fragile and ready to shatter. A few weeks later, I found myself in an orphanage, as if my old life had never existed. No one ever told me what happened or why I was spared. I was left with nothing but the nightmares and the feeling that somehow I had been chosen to survive. Up until a few weeks ago, I never questioned what really happened that night. But on my 28th birthday, something inside me snapped. I couldn't ignore the empty gaps in my memory any longer, so I decided to dig into my past, hoping for answers. It took time, sifting through old records, making endless phone calls, but eventually, I uncovered the truth. And when I did, it felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. The heartbreaking, stomach-churning truth was revealed, and it was far worse than I could have ever imagined. It turns out the answer was inside me all along. My schizophrenia, something I never thought to connect to that night. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 15, but my parents knew long before then. Those vitamins they insisted I take every night, they weren't vitamins at all. They were my medication. And that one night when they were so excited for a date, the first in years, they forgot to tell the babysitter. They forgot just once in so many years. It was a small, innocent mistake, one they never had the chance to fix. Without my medication, I had an episode, one so severe that I became the monster in the room. I was the one who took a knife to my brother, who attacked Katie, who stood over my parents as they cried and did nothing. I killed them all, every single one, and then I blacked out. The truth shattered me. One forgotten dose, one tiny mistake, and 5 lives were destroyed in a single night. Now, every time I close my eyes, I relive that nightmare, knowing I'm the reason they're gone. The real horror isn't the memory. It's the reality I have to live with. I wish I never knew. I guess some things are better left alone.